Real Life Outdoors radio show with Nate Bailey. Everything you need to know about hunting Southern Oregon. Wake the wild within.
Welcome to the Life Outdoors, and you guys, it's almost here. Elk season is on us, and I'm pretty excited. It's going to be a good year for us. We drew some tags over in Eastern Oregon, but if you didn't draw tags, you still need to get out there and get your over-the-counter tag. And today you're in luck, because we're going to talk a little bit about hunting the Cascade area. And the Cascade areas in Oregon are all general season, so you can hunt in Oregon almost every year. You can hunt elk in Oregon, which is, sometimes the elk hunting is not as easy as other times, but at least you're still hunting elk. A lot of people, can't do that in the United States. So we're going to jump into that. But before we do that, let me draw your attention over to lifeoutdoors.org. We have a lot going on over there. We have some new shirts coming out. We have some new hats coming out, and we also have some other merchandise that helps support what we're doing here at the Life Outdoors, but also is just really good stuff. You guys would really enjoy the merchandise that's over there. So let's jump into the talking about the Cascades and general season elk hunting. General season elk hunting, man. I don't know. I drew a tag this year, but there's something about those big, gnarly Cascade bulls. And if you've been around them, they're a little bit different than, say, a Rocky or a Roosevelt. They're kind of an in-between, and they have these really dark brown antlers, and they tend to grow not really long tines. Some of them do, but they're really thick and huge. You see a 300-inch bull that comes out of the Cascades. It's a good mature bull. He'll probably draw your eye to him even more than, say, like a 360-inch bull that has long spilly antlers. There's just something about them. The big gnarly antlers of a Cascade bull are crazy. One of the other things about the Cascades too is it's where most all of the wilderness areas are in the state. So when you when you're looking at trying to get away from people, the Cascades are a perfect place to do that. Of course, there's places that have more people than other places, but the Cascades themselves, if you're willing to put in the work and you're willing to get off the trail systems into the wildernesses, you will find places where there's nobody else. And I'm telling you, man, that's pretty awesome about the Cascades. That's probably one of the biggest reasons I love to hunt them, is because there's this great expanse, and you can get away from people, and you can feel like you're alone out there. And that's one of the biggest reasons to really that I really like getting into the wilderness, is to try to find that solitude, find some time where you could just be still, let everything else just kind of work off of you, and those kind of things. So why would somebody really want to? Why would somebody really want to come into the Cascades? Well, one of the things is, it is a challenge. You get into some of that timber and you get away from everybody else, and say just the ground is challenging. Just getting to some of these places is really challenging. I had a friend talk to me yesterday, and we were talking, and he sent me a picture of where they got to. Of course, not disclosing anything that could show me where he was, but he was showing me this beautiful field that was way up high in the Cascades, and he was talking about, yeah, it's awesome, but it took hours to get here, and that's why you Cascade elk hunt. Now, one of the problems with that is if you're in the Cascades, and you're spending a bunch of time to get to certain spots, you have soaked up a lot of time. If there's not elk there, you're committing a lot of time to it. So it's one of those trade-off things, right? But I'm getting to the point in my life now where I'm willing to chase one bull, and if I can get on 2 or 3 times, I'll probably eventually get a hold of him. Gage and I got on one last year, and we got up there and we called that bull in. We had him bugling several times. We called that bull in, and of course we didn't get him, but and then we went back in with the Crucible Project people, and we got in on that same bull again. So it's you could do that with the Cascades, and a lot of times too, if you find a big herd, there's going to be several bulls around. If you have several cows that are going to be going into heat, the bulls will kind of collect and be around that herd. So it's kind of fun. Once you find that, you can move around. Now, with the wolves coming in, it makes it a little bit harder. Because the wolves will push them around a little bit more, but they're a pretty cool animal, and I think it's worth your time and it's worth the effort. But you better be in shape. Last couple of years I let myself really get out of shape, trying to do stuff here with the Life Outdoors and having to edit video and then of course we have a TV show and just all the stuff that it takes, all the time that it takes. You're sitting in front of a screen quite a bit. And then, if you're trying to just live regular life, you don't have as much time to keep up with your fitness. But here's the thing is I've caught myself last year just dying out there, and you can't be that way. If you're going to hunt effectively, it's going to hurt regardless, but you got to be able to get past that hurt and just say, well, by the end of the year, I'll be running up and down these mountains, and that's part of it too. So that's probably one of the biggest things about the Cascades, and that's the biggest reason I think you should hunt the Cascades right there, is because of the fact that you get out and you're going to be in a wild place, and being in that wild place and away from all the other stuff that goes on, it's just worth your time. Now, it's going to open late August, and then it closes late September. But you got to understand the differences in those seasons, that we're going through that shift, through that change. That's a change of time right there. So opening day is going to be different than closing day. Opening day, the bulls are going to be out, and we've actually called bulls up in the Cascades during opening day. We've had bulls tear up trees in front of us. We've had all sorts of goofy stuff happen, but you got to understand something is a lot of times they're not herded up, and it's time for the little guys to run their mouths, and the big guys usually aren't usually running their mouths nearly as much, or aren't getting after it nearly as much as the little guys during that time of year. So you got to change your tactics to that. There's bulls are starting to feel a little bit like they're ready to start pulling harems together. A lot of times what we see is the younger, more aggressive bulls, the 3-year-olds, the nice 5 points or nice 6 points that are not huge or anything, start pulling the cows in, and they'll pull them in, and then they probably breed a few, I would imagine, but then the big bulls come in and take over the herd. And that's usually what happens is the big bulls let all the little bulls kind of do all the work of gathering the cows or getting close to the cows. And I don't know how many herds like in the Cascades that they actually have to gather. If you look at the herds in the Cascades, the cows and the calves and little bulls pretty much stay together. But, man, we've been in some herds that were huge. So it's like they gather 2 or 3 of those harems and then put them together. And then the big bull will step in and he'll just kind of take over, which is really cool. But one of the things is you got to understand that about hunting that area is you got to understand that that's what the bulls are doing. Then you got to, adjust accordingly. So in August, the first part of August, we do a lot of cow calls. We do a lot of trying to locate and get in the way, because elk, when they move, man, they move pretty consistent, and they're pretty loud, and you can make a lot of movements within the herd, so you can move along with them. Just keep an eye on your wind and keep an eye on where you're going, and don't get real out in the open for them. You don't want to blow them out, but at the same time, you can move among them. It's a little bit different than, say, a black-tailed deer. So that's the biggest thing, is that time of year I would definitely I would definitely go after trying to figure out how to get in front of them, how to be a part of the herd, and then making something happen in that dynamic. One of the other, so as it progresses though, those bulls start getting more and more ruddy. And if you start seeing and hearing bugles, that's the first thing, right? If you start hearing a lot of bugles, Cascade bulls don't bugle a bunch. The big ones do. The little ones bugle every so often, but they're not going to, man, for some reason, it's not like, say, Eastern Oregon where they bugle at each other all the time. Usually a big bugle, one of the big bulls will bugle and it shuts all the little guys up, but they come to bugles. So if you challenge one of those big bulls, you're going to have little ones coming in. They're going to come in and want to see who's challenging the big bull. And it's kind of strange. A lot of the big bulls that we see have big antlers that are broken. We found broken antler pieces in the woods. It's just crazy to think that they actually go that hard and fight that hard up there, but they do. And I think that's why the little bulls just kind of keep quiet, because they get their butts kicked pretty early. But you just keep following that, and then as that builds, as you start seeing rubs and you start noticing the bull's poop is starting to get really clumpy, you know that they're starting to get ruddy. And once they start doing that, then you just go and get in the face of those bulls. And be ready, though, because the little guys are going to come in. So that 3-year-old, he's probably going to bugle back, and he's probably going to try to come in and fight you. But I'm talking like the 4 points and under, the 2 and 2.5-year-olds down to even spikes. I've had spikes come in. So those are the different tactics we use. And then we like huge, thick reeds. So something like Born and Raised, we used September was a good one also, and OTC was a good one from Born and Raised, but they got some new ones now that we're probably going to use more, and then we'll switch to the September when we get in close. But the Magic Circle is my favorite, and Old Growth's good too. Old Growth is kind of like a punch in the face, and then the Magic Circle is like you could call from a distance. But you got to understand that these calls are a part of. They're a little bit heavier, and Born and Raised, those guys have hunted the coast. They've hunted this heavy, dense, thick stuff, so they know what it takes to get a dense call, and that's what we use. Is we use those heavier, dense calls and that heavy stuff. And I'll tell you right now, that's what I'm going to be using this year. Is I'll probably be using the Magic Circle a ton. And it's a purple call, but that thing, it rings. So that's one of the things that we have to really take into account. Moving in, this Cascade game is really a mental game. It's because you're going to go up and you're not going to find elk. You're going to find places that look so elky. Or you might even find places that are tore up with bull sign, but there's no cow sign in there. Like there's, that there's been bulls in there, but those bulls will move out and they'll go find the herds. They'll go up in these bull harems, live there all summer, and then start rubbing and start getting, they do a lot of it at night, and then they start getting all rutted up, and they decide, well, it's time for me to go down and find the cows. So that's a lot that happens in the Cascades. So you need to get your mindset. You need to be able to move, and you need to be able to move through a lot of different terrain, and a lot of terrain that looks like it should just hold hundreds of elk. The Cascades, the elk are spotty as far as elk numbers, but once you do find them, it is well worth your time. You just got to find them. And so that means a lot of miles, and a lot of miles outside of a vehicle, a lot of miles with, say, camp on your back. So it beats on you. It's like something that just keeps eating at you. So you got to be ready for that. Another thing you got to be ready for is you got to be able to handle being up in the wilderness during. You got to be able to handle being in the wilderness during the night by yourself or with a buddy. That's one of the reasons that I like to do it. But you got to be willing to do that. So when we get back, we're going to take a break here, let the sponsors catch up. But when we get back, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what some of those tactics are moving into the Cascades. And we already covered a little bit of that, but I'll give you a couple more things.
Hunting Southern Oregon. The Life Outdoors radio show on Gold Country Radio with Nate Bailey. Keep it tuned right here for more ways to perfect your craft. Coming up next, Wake the Wild Within.
This is Dave. Dave makes the tastiest burritos in town. But
nobody knows I exist. I'm serving culinary masterpieces to my mom and a raccoon named Dennis.
Then came Jenny.
Dave, have you tried radio?
Radio, isn't that for traffic reports and late-night alien talk?
It's also for thousands of people who don't know you exist.
Huh?
Yet, radio is affordable, reliable, and it works. Not instant burrito fame, but people start showing up kind of results.
So I partnered with Gold Country Radio, and now people know I exist. I've got new customers, catering calls, and Dennis brought a possum. I think they're dating.
I told you. Radio gets your business heard.
Next up, we a second table, maybe indoor seating.
Want to get your business heard? Visit goldcountryradio.org and click Contact to get started. Radio, small budget, big reach, real results.
One of the things that we use up in the wilderness is this product called Rec Pack. And it is 700 calories, and it's kind of like a milkshake. And you just put water in it, and you shake it up, and then you can eat this on the go, and you don't have to stop. You can put it, it's like a water bottle. You can put a water bottle beside you, and you can drink it as you're hunting, as you're going, and you get 700 calories right there. It's full of protein, and it's good stuff for you. And going up into the mountains, we found out that, like eating a mountain house, we eat a mountain house in the evenings, but during the day, if you eat a mountain house, a lot of times you got to sit and digest that thing, or else your stomach's gurgling the whole time. Rec Pack doesn't do that. You can go check out Rec Pack. They're recpack.com. And if you go over there, check them out. And I would suggest the vanilla chai is one of my favorites. And you could go over there and you could be moving and eating at the same time. It's recpack.com.
The Life Outdoors radio show with Nate Bailey. Everything you need to know about hunting Southern Oregon. Wake the Wild Within.
All right, we're back. Now, let's move into some of the tactics, some of the things that you need to do to get into these Cascade bulls. One of the things is remember how rugged and dense and difficult the Cascades can be just in nature. I mean, and it's funny because you get into these boulder patches, and then there's alder patches in the boulders that grow in the boulders, and there's some kind of some kind of moisture in there. So a lot of times that has yellow jackets and hornets in it. And we get stung, I don't know how many times during the year hunting the Cascades, and more so than anywhere else that we've ever hunted. And partially because it's dry up there, but there's also all of this storm, and there's a lot of rain, and there's a lot of puddles and stuff. You get all the thunderstorms come through the Cascades, and so you get a lot of bees. So understand that all these things and the deep vegetation, I mean, there's some stuff in the wilderness area that is just crisscrossed in there, and you have to just go around it. We got places that we mark that we don't go into, just because most animals don't go in there either, because it's just so dense of blowdown. And then understand, one of the biggest things that you got to understand about the Cascades is you got to understand how the elk work up there. One of the biggest things, I think, is understanding the big old growth thickets, understanding how the elk use that, but also understand where they feed. Where elk need grass. The elk like grass, and they're more of a grazer than they are a browser. So if you find grass in the Cascades, and look for those, I know everybody's like, well, southern facing slopes. Yeah, that's where they eat. They eat in the southern facing slopes. The slopes that are that the sun hits most of the day, that's where most of the nutrients are in the grass. Those deep green marshy areas that have grass in them look really good for elk. Elk like to go through them at night, and they'll hang out in there, and they like to bed in that stuff. But they don't sit there and eat in that. That's not their primary diet, I should say. Of course, they're going to eat there, but that's not their primary diet. If you go up and you find like a hayfield, that's what you're looking for. You're looking for, and it's going to be drier, and it's going to be on that southern-facing slope. And you'll know when you get there because there'll be a lot. It'll look like cattle have been through there, and the browse will be ate down. And you can just look at the browse, even if they haven't been there for a while. If they have been there at some point, they will eat the tops of the grass off, and it'll be flat on top. And you're looking for a big herd of that, right? I don't care if you're out doing your summer scouting and you find a bunch of elk in a spot but no bulls. Understand that those elk are going to attract the bulls. So that's where you're going to want to hunt. If I see cows on my camera, say in mid-July to August, I am overwhelmed because I know, and especially if they keep showing up there, because I know that's where the elk are going to be. And so that's one of the things that tells me that I'm going to be hunting that spot. You got to find those cows, and that's the biggest thing, is finding the cows, and you're going to find them around feed. So, Cascade elk, they kind of act a little bit more like Rocky Mountain elk in the way that they will move a lot, and they move from these grass patches to grass passes. So one of the best things one of the best things that you can do is go early and start putting cameras up in these grass patches and find those. Go out, look on maps. A lot of times they'll show you where the grass patches are, and go put your cameras up and go look and just start doing this throughout the summer, and you're going to start learning a little bit more about the elk. Now, at the beginning of the season, they're going to act more like summer elk, but once that rut starts hitting, they'll move to different spots, and they usually move to spots that are more condensed. And what I mean by that is where they could get to their bedding area really easy, but they have their feeding area right there, and water's not too far off. I used to think elk had to go to water all the time, but I don't think that anymore. I think that they like to go to water. When they get worked up in the rut, they'll go to water. But just to eat, they could eat for a long time and get a lot of water out of what they eat. My goats are a good example of that. I've taken, pack goats in places, and they just off of what they eat, they're peeing their heads off. They pee so much, and then their poop's almost turning not like goat poop anymore, and it's just from eating all that green stuff that they eat. And so they don't need near the water that you think they do. So if you're looking at the droppings of the elk and it looks more like cattle droppings, they're probably not going to water very often. If it's lighter green and it's not dark, they're probably not going to water near as often as you think they would. So sitting on water holes and stuff in those situations sometimes doesn't make any sense. Now you get over Eastern Oregon, sometimes the water holes are farther, and Cascades are full of water. So it's sitting on a water hole in the Cascades is really kind of, I have done it, and we've put cameras on water holes and had tons of elk come across the cameras, but at the same time, it's probably not your best bet. Now, calling in the Cascades, that's one of the biggest things that we do. We call. And like I said, you want to grab the calls that you want to get are those in your face, loud mouth, gnarly, something that carries in the timber. And again, I would tell you to use the four that I like the best, and is the Old Growth from Born and Raised, the Magic Circle from Born and Raised, the September, and the Over the Counter. And those four calls will pretty much do all my calling for elk hunting. And even over in Eastern Oregon, I use those calls as well. But it's almost a necessity when you're in the Cascades, because there's so much vegetation up there. You really have to really get into those kind of calls to get past that vegetation, and because it just soaks up so much sound. So one of the other things too is understand that it's a little different. like when we hunt Eastern Oregon, we'll go from section to section and call. Whereas where we hunt in the Cascades, we're probably going to go find a ridge, walk that ridge and call. And as we walk that ridge and call through there, that's we're going to call probably every 200 yards, because it's just super hard to sometimes they just don't hear you, and you got to get closer to them. Another good call, and something that we use all the time, is the two-tone through, and it's a loud cow call, and it's almost got a bugle into it. And I don't know if you know, but the born and raised calls, all the sound comes out the front of them like a duck call, rather than off the soundboard like some of the other. If you look at some of the other brands out there, the sound comes off the soundboard. So you have a lot more volume coming out the end. It's like a duck call. And another thing about it is it's a lot more directional. You can move that thing around and move it in different directions. So that's probably one of the biggest things that I would say is if you're starting to use some cow calls, I would suggest, if you could afford it, I would suggest the two-tone, because you could take the barrel off and then you could use it. It's kind of like two calls, or use it, or use the love triangle as well. The love triangle is great for closer. The two-tone is great for like bugling cow calls. And what I mean by that is getting the cow calls out there. You want to get those out. I've actually called in quite a few bulls cow calling loud, and they've answered me with bugles, and then I just keep cow calling. One of the things is early season, you're probably going to call more of those younger bulls in with the cow call than you're going to call a lot of the bulls will be smaller bulls, will be a little bit less apt to come in if you're calling with a bugle. So I like to use the cow call kind of like a bugle and locate with it. And if you use that two-tone, it's really loud and it's worth your time doing. So those are some of the reasons, some of the things that calling wise, I think is probably our biggest game. That's probably what we do the most. But you can do spot and stock. If you get into some of that stuff in the Cascades, especially in the burns, and I don't like hunting the burns as much because I get pretty hot and it feels desolate, but the cows love them, or the elk love them, because they have a lot of feed in them. So if you're into the burns, you can get up there in the Cascades, and of course, you know, all your mapping software companies that are out there have, they show you where the burns are. And so you could go up there, and then you could kind of pick spots where you could go up and just, go up there and glass and look them over. And I know several guys that do this in the Cascades, and they're very, they have a good success doing it. And they get in the middle of all those, clear cuts, or not clear cuts, but burns up there. And they start looking around and they find a herd, and they'll move in on the herd. And some of them will come in and just, call a little bit in the herd, or some will just be quiet. I know so many bow hunters that, elk hunt without even blowing a call. And it seems so weird to me, because that's half the reason I bow hunt, but these guys are really successful doing it. And you could do that as well. You could get up there and start looking around and find those, burns, and get a high spot and just figure out where the elk are going, get in front of them. Like I said, elk are pretty, when they're moving, you can pretty much tell which direction they're going to go, unless something changes that, right? So if they're feeding across a hillside, they usually stay on that elevation, and they usually move that same direction unless they get changed. So that's something that you could do. I don't do it a lot, so I'm not really a good person to talk about that, but it does happen. One of the biggest things, and probably the biggest thing of all, is knowing your wind and being able to understand how your area, or even the Cascades, work. It's always going to be cool in the mornings down in the bottom, and as that sun comes up, and this gets less and less as it gets more into September, but as that sun comes up and heats the bottoms, of course that hot air is going to rise. So you got to understand that those thermals are going to come up. I like to hunt elk on hillsides. So what I mean by that is I like to hunt an elk where I'm either above them, calling down to them, or I'm on just walking parallel along this hillside and I'm calling. And if they answer me above me, I'll back up and I'll go clear to the top, and then I'll mark it where I think they are on my app or whatever, and I'll go up and I'll go across, and then I'll come back. I'll try to come down on them. I like to call down on bulls. You can't call up on bulls. If the bull's got the upper ground on you, he's never going to come in. He's not going to feel threatened enough. He's going to be like, yeah, whatever, kid. But if you come down on him, you're going to push more of that nerve to him. And then I like to get really close. That's another thing about my calling is if I could get that bull located or the herd located, because it's really the herd. By the time that bulls are really bugling in the Cascades and really going, there's a herd there. It's not just one bull. So I like to locate that, and then I like to get close to that herd. I'll get as close as I can to the herd and just try to get mingled within it. And if I could get as close as I can and sneak in there and then blow a bugle, that usually gets them going. That's usually what gets the bulls to come my direction is just getting close and then making them have to deal with you because you're that close to their cows. So that's how we do it. That's that's our main game in the Cascades. Next week I'll jump in a little bit more and I'll tell you a little bit more about how we scout and things like that, how we find these animals. But one of the biggest things, I guess the biggest takeaway from this is get into shape and cover ground, and then take in the fact that you are in solitude and the beauty of it. And that will keep you going in the Cascades because it can be tough up there, but it can be the most rewarding hunt that you've ever been on too. Just the hunt itself is more rewarding than most other hunts that I go on. I love the Cascades. I'll always be something in me that wants to go up and find the next little meadow up there, and and find the next little unnamed lake that you could swim in and grab your water from, and it's just one of those places magical. So with that said, you guys, tune in next week. We'll talk a little bit more about this, but until then, remember to wake that wild within and get out there. If you didn't draw, the Cascades are waiting for you. Get after it, and I'll try to help you become successful up there through these podcasts and through our YouTube channel and everything else that we're doing this year for the Cascades.
Thanks for listening to the Life Outdoors radio show. Tune in next Sunday evening at 7 p.m. to continue to hone the primitive skills that man has always been meant to master. Hunting Southern Oregon. The Life Outdoors radio show with Nate Bailey. Wake the wild within.